So this video is about Trump behaving like a dictator. And I don't want to get dragged into the petty arguments about is he Hitler, is he not Hitler, this, that, and the third. And I know that a lot of his opponents have been very vocal about trying to make that comparison or about trying to portray him as a dictator. And so it tends to get dismissed or laughed off by his defenders or even people who don't consider themselves ardent supporters but are trying to hear him out. They're going to look at that as Godwin's fallacy and just say, you know, give him a chance. But I would say that while many of his detractors and the people trying to attack him are emotionally unstable and prone to use hyperbole and basically throw tantrums and hissy fits, um, there is a decent case to be made that he actually is behaving somewhat like a dictator and that he has been doing so throughout his entire campaign. He has a sort of see, I don't call him Hitler because like you don't want to say he's Hitler. The guy didn't kill 6,000 6 million Jews. Sorry, he didn't do any of that gulag shit. He's not. And that was Stalin. But either way, you know, he's not Hitler, but he's like Hitlerish. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, sort of Hitlerish. And when I say that, I just mean it's kind of hard to ignore the reality as an American citizen when you're just looking at like the way that he conducted his campaign and he basically launched a nationalist oriented campaign, made national identity the focus of his campaign, focused on immigration and terror as the two major topics of his administration, and used loose wording in many cases to fire up that base of right wing American nationalists, and in some cases white nationalists, but not always white nationalists. But just saying that is a part of his base, and it is what it is, and it's a part of the people who are very receptive to a lot of the rhetoric that he was espousing, especially in regard to immigration. You know, the fact that he disavowed David Duke, and the fact that the media even demanded he disavow David Duke at the time, I was like, they're just like looking for a connection here. But that being said, David Duke's strategy or comments on immigration very closely match Donald Trump's concerns on immigration. And so it's like he almost took a play out of the David Duke playbook, you know. And it's almost kind of common sense why these white nationalist movements are behind Trump in the first place. Um, so I don't want to poison the well and say he's guilty by association of being a white nationalist. And I'm getting detracted here because I was talking about how he's acting like a dictator. But he's made these overtures throughout the campaign. He retweeted Mussolini, retweeted a quote by Il Duce. And then, when called on, he said, well, I didn't know who made the quote. It was a good quote. You retweet a guy and he turns out to be a white supremacist. It's funny that he didn't know that quote was from Mussolini. That's funny. But it's also telling that the quote spoke to him so strongly. And it wasn't a straight up racist quote. It was just a sort of semi-fascist quote. But before I get too off the rails here, because I tend to do that. Sorry, folks. I have ADD like a motherfucker. Basically, uh, all of that was hearsay up until the fact that he became president. It was all just like this guy's going around talking mad shit, saying Muslim ban, saying all this, going around just talking shit, just making these proposals that looked like something that an authoritarian regime might do. Um, and that would be very hard to do without that sort of centralized autocratic power that authoritarian regimes enjoy. It's a lot harder to do the kind of things that Donald Trump promised to do as president because you have to work with Congress and all these other boring motherfuckers in Washington. So that's part of it. But now he's president, and now basically his approach has not changed in the slightest. To my surprise, I thought he was going to drop a lot of his promises. He has made it clear he's not trying to drop a single promise. He's trying to pursue all the avenues that he said except for where he has to back down a little bit. Like he can't literally ban Muslims because of the Constitution, but he can make a symbolic gesture in that direction. He can try to build the wall. He can do all these things that he said he's going to do. And he's using executive orders up the ass to try to do it, which was always called, whenever Obama was doing that, it was always called by his opponents to be, he's being Caesar. He's trying to take the American democracy and turn it into the American empire. And Trump is ramping that up a notch. And I knew he would because he has that personality. And his approach towards leadership has been, I'm going to run it like a business. He wants to run America like a business, like the CEO of a business. And he wants to be that guy that has the power, his hands on the reins. And that's all more more in line with authoritarianism and more in line with dictatorship than with the spirit of the American president and American democracy. And his approach in general would work better as an authoritarian figure. And he systematically undermines anybody or any institution which might stand to stand in his way. Like he calls the judge, when the judge strikes down his ban, he calls him so-called judge, starts questioning the legitimacy of him. He'll question the legitimacy of the media. He'll question the legitimacy of the government, or he'll imply they're corrupt. He'll say that they're inept. He'll basically systematically through what he does have control over is the Trump propaganda campaign. He does have control over the message he continues to put out to his followers because he's the head of a movement. He's very different from any other president that's ever been in office. He's not a career politician. He doesn't have anything to lose, really, now that he's in there. It's not like he has to worry about, oh, what am I going to do after this? There's nothing for him to lose. He went from not being a politician to being president. There's nowhere for him to go beyond that. And so he's going to do everything in his power to make himself more powerful. And so, yeah, I see no sign of him backing down. I see no sign of him slowing down. And I don't think that it's going to continue to work for everybody who just wants to laugh it off and be like, come on. He's not being a dictator. Would you stop being so hype about, why don't you take a few history lessons on how dictatorships form and how, democracies go that way. Hitler wasn't the only one in history. Okay, we've had some others, and I really think that Trump, it's his style, it's his personality, and it's him as a phenomena that really serves as a potential ramping up of the climate that's eventually going to lead to an authoritarian state in the United States. And the fact that his opponents are just doubling down on their own quasi-totalitarian ideology is all the more convincing to me that this is what's going on, because it's not like we're getting a reasonable critique from the left of the Trump regime that's systematically undermining what we're doing. He's turning them into a chaotic tailspin of leftist neurosis and paranoia, and turning them into to basically the rivals that a emerging authoritarian regime would love to have. They would love that rival. They're so perfect. It's choice. And if he doesn't work out, then he becomes the choice rival that you can anchor on to then say, okay, we need to fucking lock shit down because that was crazy. We're about to, we're not playing this bullshit anymore. So yeah, I think I think Trump is another step in the direction of authoritarianism, and it remains to be seen exactly how it's going to play out over the next 4 to 8 years. Um, but I'll go ahead and say it. I think he'll get another four in there. I think he'll do 2 terms at least. That's just my guess. But yeah. All right. I'm gonna end it there. It's 10 minutes.